Now, ties between the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the controversial Unification Church in Japan are under intense scrutiny after former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated last month. The gunman had cited Abe's links with the group as a motivation for killing him. The church has just held a rare media briefing in the last hour. And for more, Michio Ishida joins us live now. Now, Michio, what was the main takeaway of that briefing?
Yes, well, President Tomohiro Tanaka of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification spoke at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. And he strongly criticized the Japanese media for reporting negatively about his organization. Now, he did admit that there were problems with his organization before 2009, which led to the resignation of president. But he did not provide details of the problems. Regarding attempts to change its name from the Unification Church, he said that it's not to hide its identity or do away with its negative past. But regarding this attempt was an idea of its founder, Mr. Moon Sung-myon, who wanted to change the name of the organization worldwide. But it was only in 2015 that the Japanese government has decided to accept the change of name. Now, he also talked about so-called organized marriages. And he said that in the past, Reverend Moon has arranged these marriages, but now these organized marriages are more about consent between the groom and the bride. And he actually criticized those family members or friends, relatives who try to abduct or detain one or both couples from each other. Mr. Tanaka said that in reality, the divorce rate among those who have married in this format is under 2%. And the Japanese average divorce rate is 35%. Now, as to the killing conducted by the son of their follower, that's the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Mr. Tanaka said that he has not heard anything official from the police. But if the police come out with official reports, then he will comply or he will respond accordingly.
Now, Michio, how has this church become so closely tied to the political fortunes of some key figures? And also, will Mr. Kishida shuffling his cabinet again fix this problem of the sliding opinion polls?
Well, Mr. Tanaka admitted that his organization is closely involved with politics. And in fact, he encourages his members to be involved with politics, especially with the elections. And the aim is to fight communism. And because of this aim to fight communism, he finds that there's a lot of close interaction with members of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. And all this is, he said that it's the aim to build a peaceful country. We heard that Economic Revitalization Minister had donated to the Unification Church, and he's in this reshuffle cabinet. And the new Internal Affairs Minister, we heard today that he's also given donation to the former Unification Church. Now, due to these reports coming out of the reshuffle cabinet, it's uncertain how this might impact Mr. Kishida's newly formed cabinet, of whether he will be able to stop his approval rating from falling further.
Michio, thanks so much for that update. That was Michio Ishida live in Tokyo. Now, for a closer look at Mr. Kishida's new cabinet, we're joined by Dr. Donna Weeks, who's professor at political science at Musashi University in Tokyo. Now, Dr. Weeks, let's pick up on that topic of the Unification Church. We know that Mr. Kishida will be hoping that these cabinet changes will do the trick to improve the party's image with some damage control. Do you think this will appease the voters?
Well, it's an interesting question. I, too, also just watched that media presentation by the president of the Unification Church here in Japan. And as he was speaking, you know, as the new cabinet has been announced as well, we were also getting notifications that some of the new cabinet ministers do have those direct links to the church. So if Mr. Kishida's objective on the one hand was to try and distance himself, clearly that hasn't been the case at this point.
Well, the cabinet shakeup also came a month earlier than expected. Why else is Prime Minister Kishida's administration losing public support so quickly?
I think there's a couple of things involved here. Obviously, domestically there are issues of rising prices of daily living costs, which are concerning people. The coronavirus, the COVID is, the case numbers are up. We're all just about to go on our summer holidays, and people are debating whether or not they can go back to their families. So there's very much that immediate effect that people are feeling on their day-to-day lives. But also, as this also has, of course, the overlay with the Unification Church, and as more and more people are hearing about the ties between politicians and this particular religious group, people are getting more and more concerned about to what extent that's had an impact. And one of the big turnarounds I think we've seen in the last month is the people are starting to really come out strongly against the idea of a state-funded memorial for former Prime Minister Abe, which is due to be held in September. Now, immediately after his death and immediately at the announcement of this state-funded memorial, people were quite, understandably, well, they supported it. But as this connection with the church has become stronger and stronger, one of the recent polls in the last couple of days, people are coming up very strongly against a state-funded, and they do want to see that very clear distinction and separation between the state and this particular group. And that seems to be one of the big factors in the turnaround in some of the opinion polls in the last couple of days.
Now, Dr. Weeks, let's take a look now at the cabinet reshuffle. Some analysts say that the Prime Minister is opting for more experience and also stability in this new cabinet. What's your take on his strategy behind his choices?
Yes, look, it was always going to be interesting to see how much he wanted to separate. It's always a factional deal. I mean, whose factions get in and who's stepped back. Yes, you can certainly see with, today on the front page there, I guess he's gone with age and experience. The average age is about 66 years old for cabinet, and he's brought some people back who have previously been ministers. He had to change the defence minister, Prime Minister Kishida's younger brother. He's clearly ailing in his health, and so this was an opportunity to move him as well. I guess, someone who studies women in politics, there's always the how many women have made it. And this time there's only two, which replaces two. So it's still a very small number. Significantly, one of his two actually contenders for the presidential election of the LDP last year are now back in the cabinet. That's Kono, who is seen amongst many to have some level of popularity, but also Takeichi Sanae, who is seen as a protege of former Prime Minister Abe. Quite a conservative, I suppose, woman, if you like, and she's been given the economic security posting, which is quite a significant one for her. And I know she has prime ministerial ambitions. So he's got a cabinet with people with their own prime ministerial ambitions, and technically he doesn't have to call an election for another 3 years. So whether he's wanting to put people through to give them that experience, or whether he's playing a little bit of an interesting game in terms of who he has brought in and who he hasn't.
And speaking of people with ambition, another veteran that Mr. Kishida has brought back is Yasukazu Hamada, and he's going to be defense minister. So what does that tell you about Mr. Kishida's position on national security?
Well, this has always been, for me, an interesting point with Mr. Kishida. I mean, he is from Hiroshima, and of course, August being what it is, we've just had the commemorations for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where he spoke, and obviously being a Hiroshima native, he spoke quite strongly on, a world in the future of no nuclear weapons. How much Kishida wants to pull himself out from underneath the Abe kind of approach to foreign relations is, for me, a big question here at the moment. And bringing back Hamada, he may be trying to balance that. Obviously, here in Japan as well, we have the concerns over China and Taiwan and where that's going to go, and how they're going to play that. So I think Kishida, to me, there's a part of Kishida that wants to press ahead with his agenda. He was formerly foreign minister himself for several years, but also I think has to pull him with that balance it with that Abe legacy as well. So I think the next few months are going to be quite interesting on the foreign policy front, most certainly.
And there are also a lot of other challenges that Japan is facing, both domestic and abroad as well. Do you think that this cabinet reshuffle goes far enough to tackle Japan's challenges?
Look, at the moment, I don't think so. I think it is a shuffle for shuffle's sake, if you like. I think there's still a lot to come out of this. Whether or not people are going to respond to this, as I said, it will mostly come back to these sort of domestic issues of price rises and, whether or not that turns into inflation and whether or not people are going to have their pay increased. And that's also low wages has become quite an issue in the last few months as well. So there's a lot of, everyday sort of hip pocket issues that concern people. But as I said, because the next election isn't actually due, although you can call it any time, isn't actually due until 2025, I think he's going to just try and see how he can juggle all these things at the moment. And, there could be another reshuffle down the track. He might be just wanting to put people through the cabinet too, just to give everybody their chances. Sometimes happens with these reshuffles.